Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, I have structural engineer David Kim with me. Hey David, how are you?
Hey Blair, good. How are you?
I'm great. Well, if you don't know already, David is actually my husband and the father of our two children, in addition to being a structural engineer, amongst many other things that you are, honey. But today we're here to chat more about what it is that you do 5 days a week, 9 to 5.
hmm
So what does a structural engineer do?
Um, a structural engineer, like the name implies, is responsible for designing structures, like buildings, bridges. Yeah, every structure that you see outside is designed by a structural engineer.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions, and
hmm
I feel like it's going to be hard to do this interview a little bit because I feel like I know the answers to a lot of the questions that I have.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be hard for me to like talk to you like I don't know you either. You know
Okay,
what I'm
well, we
saying?
have to pretend for
Okay,
the sake of people that want to be a structural engineer.
sure.
um, okay, well, for me, I don't know too much about what you do. I mean, I do, but you know, what I've seen since you've been working from home is like you working on the computer and then like with your mouse, like drawing a bunch of lines on a
hmm
program.
Sure.
And then a number will come out
hmm
with more lines you have to draw. So you're not an architect drawing a building, right?
Correct.
So what is it that you're actually doing as a structural engineer?
So I mean that's a common question that I get usually. Like, what's the difference between a structural engineer and an architect? I think answering that question kind of gives you a better idea of what I do. So usually the architect will design what these structures or buildings look like, and the structural engineer designs how it's going to stand at the end of the
Mm.
day. So all these buildings are supported by beams and columns and foundations, and all those things are designed by the structural engineer. So I mean, if you use like an analogy of a person, I guess, of a human being, like the architect would design what the person looks like, or maybe what they're wearing, or the makeup, or whatever. But the structural engineer is the person in charge of designing the bones, right? What's holding that person up.
Which sounds like a really critical part of the process of building a building because I mean from what you just said then that means architects literally can't do it without structural engineers.
Yes, they cannot.
Okay, I'm curious, like have you ever had um like an architect come to you with a building plan or like a idea and you were like, sorry, that's not gonna work?
Yes, but it's usually my boss who says it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, is it usually, do you know if it's usually like because their idea is too like detail oriented and they're not thinking about the actual like what needs to happen in order for that to happen? Do you get what I'm asking?
I mean, it's never happened like to a building before.
Okay.
It's usually like, say in a school, for example, we design a lot of schools and grocery stores. But I mean, grocery stores are all the same, so there's not usually no issues with those. But in schools, a lot of times, if there are, little classrooms with too many windows, for example, and that wall is not strong enough to, I mean, there's not enough wall left, it's all windows. Like,
Mhm.
that's usually an issue, like, that we find. I'd be like, oh, there's too many windows in this wall, and, there's no much wall left to hold this thing up. So that's usually a problem. But mostly, honestly, it's usually that kind of stuff, like openings, like walls and doors and stuff like that, that they want to put in different places that sometimes end up not working.
Yeah, that's interesting though. But like even you saying that, I can see in the design mind, like yeah, why there should be more windows. It would
Right,
look a lot prettier.
right,
Kids would like to look outside of a school.
right.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay, so as a structural engineer,
Mm-hmm.
like okay, actually, this is something that I should probably ask you before I ask anything else. Could you tell me a little bit about where you work, like your company, your firm?
Sure. I work at a company called Robertson Lloyd Roof, architects and engineers. And as the name suggests, it's not just an engineering company, it's an architecture and engineering company. So usually what we do is all in one like package deal usually.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're building a school, our architects will design it and our engineers will come in and design the rest. Yeah, that's where I work. Is that the question? That's it, right?
Yes. And so my next question is I know that there is like a process to building, let's say, a school,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, what part of the process is a structural engineer included in like the project?
So usually how it happens is the architect will have the project first. The architect and the civil engineer. The civil engineer is responsible for the outside. But then the architect will come up with a preliminary plan
Mm-hmm.
and, go back and forth with the owner to make sure that's what they want it to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So once the architects have that plan finalized, like
Mm-hmm.
once they have the building looking like they want it to look like, let's say like 80% of the way, that's when they will start the project with all the engineers.
Mm.
So that, even if there are changes, they're not like crazy changes, they're minimal changes
I
that
see,
happen
I see. To the design
to
itself.
the looks of the building,
I
like
see.
where walls are going to go and stuff like that.
So, I'm curious, like you said, then they include all the engineers, but like
Hmm.
how many different types of engineers need to be included in this?
Usually we have electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, plumbing, sanitary, water, like all these different things that need to come together. And so we have all of those in our company, so we end up working together.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, I mean, is that common to have like everything in-house to build a building?
I don't know actually, but I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I
Uh-huh.
do know that there are a lot of standalone structural engineering firms that will, you know, be consultants pretty much. So if there's an architecture firm, they will send their plans to the standalone structural firm, and then they'll go back and forth like that.
So they're like contracted out.
Yeah, pretty much.
I see. So are there benefits to having everybody in-house?
Yeah, it's easier to coordinate. It doesn't take days from it doesn't take like I don't have to email someone and wait for them to respond. I can just walk up to their desk and be like, "Hey, can you move this?" or do I have to move this?" It's easier to communicate, and
Mm.
it also helps that we have a relationship, and it's not just like it's harder when they're not you don't have a relationship with them, right? And you're
Right,
just like
right.
trying to not step on their toes and like but then also having to tell them this is not going to work or yeah. So I think it does. I think it's better to work together.
Hmm. So, what does a typical day for you look like then? Like, are you working on a lot of projects or, yeah, are you sitting at a computer? What are you doing?
So my typical day usually looks like me sitting in front of the computer
Mm.
all day. But what I do usually varies. So, like you said, like the project has different phases to completion. And it's not like one project a day kind of thing. Like a project will take several months, to be finalized. So the first part of the project is when we first receive the building, you know, uh, blueprint
Mm-hmm.
from the architect or the 3D model that we receive from them. And so we will import it into our file, and then that's when I start. So The first phase, if I'm in that part of the project, what I usually do is my days will look like making a 3D model for my structure on top of theirs, and then yeah, calculating all the loads that are going to be in the building, like say the weight of the people that are going to be there, of the material, like all these, the wind force, the earthquake, like all these things need to be calculated, and then I input into my models, and then I find out, what sizes I need to use, like how big the foundation needs to be, how big the beam and columns need to be, and then once I find that out, I draw them into the model. Like I put them into the model. I say draw, but it's like, I guess it's drawing. Yeah, you draw it into the model, and then you make your own 3D model with, you know, into that. So that's usually the bulk of my days. The next phase would be like once I finish that, and once everyone finishes their part, and we send our drawings in for the contractors to bid, or for the subcontractors to find out how much it's going to cost. Like all these things end up like coming back with questions. So a lot of times, some days will be spent like answering questions or finding out if things can be changed. And then the last part is like once everything is done, once they start constructing, I guess sometimes we go to site visits to just see the progress of the construction. But all that to say, mostly my days are filled with just calculating and drawing the building, the 3D models.
Oh, well, that's really cool. I mean, okay, so you're talking about the 3D models, and this is like a program that you use then?
Yes, it's
Like you're
a
not just like
program.
drawing freehand.
No, it's a program called Revit.
Uh-huh.
So what happens is like the architects send me a model of the building,
Mm-hmm.
and I can use that in the background. Like it'll be a little transparent, and then I can put all my members on top of it.
I see.
Yeah. So and that after the 3D models, like it ends up not trans moving. I can like make that into like plans, like 2D plans that the
Oh.
contractors will eventually use to make the building.
Oh, cool. Like as you're talking about that though, you're saying, you have to do like calculate the wind.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Wind
Yeah,
resistance.
wind. Uh-huh.
And then like even just like, is this um floor gonna hold people?
Mm-hmm.
And then I mean, and it's funny, just like side note, because like I feel like David, you even at home, you're like, man, this is not built for this or that or something. But uh, what I was gonna say was,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of liability then with your job, because if you get it wrong, then I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people checking people's work, right?
Sure. Yes.
Um, yeah. So like, what is the liability with that? Like for structural engineers, do you know?
Um, I mean, we'll probably get into this later, but liability usually falls on the person who stamped the drawings or signed for the
Uh,
drawings, and that's my boss.
uh-huh.
So yeah, if something did happen, we'd probably get sued. But then we have insurance for that too and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, it is our fault if something happens. Like
Okay, well,
if it
I know
was
you
the fault
said
of the
we
design.
what was that?
If it was like the fault, like if something happened because of design, then obviously it's our fault.
But I mean, that rarely happens, right?
I
Because
think
like a
so.
lot of people have to check it and stuff, no?
Well, a lot of people have to check it, and also like a lot of it's usually conservative. It's not like, oh, this building is gonna have 10 people, so it can only hold 10 people. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
it'll be
right,
designed
right.
for 50 people, for
Right,
example,
right. Okay,
and
okay.
then yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, I know you said we might get into it later, but since we're talking about it now,
Hmm.
can we talk about the stamping thing? Like what is that? Like why does your boss have a stamp and you don't?
Right. So technically, I'm not a professional engineer. Um, so once you get out of school, like you graduate with a bachelor's degree, you take a test called the FE
FE.
test, Fundamentals of Engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once you pass the test, you become an engineer in training. Engineer in training, yeah, that's your title. Once you get that title, you have to work under a professional engineer for 5 years.
Mm.
And then once you do that, you are able to take another test. That's called the PE. And if you pass the test, you become a professional engineer. And
Mm.
once you receive that title is when you receive a stamp, and then you're allowed to, sign drawings that are used for construction and stuff like that.
So the FE, like, does every engineer like need to take the FE? Like, can they work if they don't have the FE? Do you know?
Yeah, they can.
Oh, they can. Okay.
Yeah,
So why take it?
because you need that to take the PE.
Oh, okay, I see. So you can't take the PE without the
No.
FE. But I guess it's beneficial to take the FE first because or as soon as you're out of college so you don't
Yeah.
forget things, right?
Yeah, because the FE is not like really, it's like a broad test. Like it includes every other like subject, and so you're not gonna remember that like 3 years later. Oh, I wouldn't remember anything about it. So
Right,
it was
right.
beneficial because I still had a little, it was a little more fresh. Like all the
Uh,
other subjects that I would never use again, or
mhm. So, with the PE and licensing and having that stamp, I would imagine that kind of liability would require a very rigorous test to go along with
Yes,
it. Is it pretty tough?
yes. So the PE is a 8-hour test. Um, and that's a more general professional engineer test.
Hmm.
And there is another test called the SE, which is structural engineer.
Oh.
So that test is geared towards structural engineers. So technically, if you have the PE, you're still able to stamp structural drawings depending on state. So it varies state by state, and some states will require you to have both. Some states will require you to have the SC. It really depends on where you are. I From what I hear, Georgia has now switched from PE to SE. So I would have to take the SE, the harder test.
Oh, that's a
So
harder test.
yes, it's a 16-hour test. And I mean, the PE has like a 65% pass rate. And I think the SE has like a 26% pass rate.
Why?
It's just hard.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
No,
really
but
hard.
like, oh, because you're saying the PE is a more generalized
Right.
test. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. And
And
SE
even,
just more specific to structural engineering.
yes. And yeah.
Interesting. Oh, well, I guess that's good to
Yeah,
know
it's
that
good.
our buildings will not fall.
Right.
And bridges. Bridges kind of freak
Sure.
me out,
Yeah, they scare me too.
right?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to take the SE?
I have to eventually.
You have to eventually,
I guess I don't have to,
right?
but it would be good to.
Right. I mean, because why? Because you would get paid more?
Well, that also depends on the company, but usually yes, if you receive the SC title or the PE, usually you get a pay raise, and even if you're looking for a different job, it would be easier for you to get a job,
Mm.
obviously because you have the credentials.
Hmm.
And honestly, more than that, like I think you learn a lot when you're studying for it.
Mm.
Yeah, and so I think it's a good thing to do.
Oh, okay. I'm not looking forward to that test for you, but
Yeah, me neither.
um well, I want to ask you about how you decided to be a structural engineer, but before I get into that, one other thing you mentioned was like site visits.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on that? I know you don't do it often, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of cool when you tell me about them.
Yeah, so you just go into this construction site where they're, just making stuff, and then you go around looking at it and making sure they have the right pieces. Like,
So like you like okay, I'm just like about
mm-hmm,
you because you're my
mm-hmm,
husband. Like
mm-hmm.
so you can look at something and know whether it's wrong or right.
You can know what's like if something's missing. For example, like this last one I just did last week, like I mean, I don't know how to say this without using technical words, but like, say there's a beam, right? There's a
Uh-huh.
beam on the roof. You can see them because it's like open. There's no ceilings or anything. Like it's just open structure. You can see the beams, and then you know where the AC unit's gonna go on top of the roof, right?
Okay.
So there's a weight on top of that beam. So
Mm-hmm.
one, that beam needs to be different than the one next to it. It
Mm.
needs to be bigger. And then under it, there needs to be like some sort of reinforcing. And I mean, you can tell if it's missing or not, obviously, because it's not there. So this last one, it was missing. I'd be like, hey, that one, you need to reinforce that. Or yeah, things like that are essential. Like you just look for like certain things and make sure they're there. And if not, you just bring it up, and then they'll be like, "Oh, we just didn't put it yet." And then like, okay,
Interesting. So the site visit that you did you do the blueprints for that particular
yes, yeah,
building?
yeah,
So like literally if something's not there, you know because you put it there.
right,
That's cool.
yeah,
No, I feel like it would be, I mean, just like our personalities, I feel
hmm,
like for for both of us, like we like seeing the result of our work,
yes,
So
hmm,
like I feel like that would be really cool to see that, right?
yeah, it is, and it's different too because you see it in person. It's different than looking at it in paper on the computer. It's like, oh, I didn't know this was this big, or
Yeah, yeah.
things like that.
That's
It
cool.
puts it into perspective.
Um yeah, so tell me like how did you decide to pursue structural engineering? Like
How did I
let's go back to
decide?
high school, honey.
Sure. So for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in Brazil,
Babe, I
and
think we have to pause. I think I
why?
can hear Zoe.
Okay, go.
Do I pause it?
No, just go.
Okay. Just kidding. I think it was just something outside. Screeching. Something screeching outside.
Okay.
Okay. You're saying, for those of you that don't know, hold on, let me catch my breath.
So for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in Brazil, and I went to an international high school there. And I think in the beginning of my high school years, um, I wanted to be an architect just because I mean, I've always had like an interest in buildings. I grew up loving Legos. I grew up loving like games that built stuff, like The Sims. I don't know if you ever played The Sims.
No, I've never.
Yeah,
I don't.
so it's a game that you build houses and stuff, and then what do you call it? Like those theme park creating
Like the roller
games.
coaster
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like everything that had to do with like building stuff, I loved and I enjoyed, and yeah, so I always enjoyed that. So I thought I wanted to be an architect, and that was my plan until I think either junior or senior year of high school.
Mm.
One of my mentors asked me like, "Oh, why don't you think about engineering instead? Because you seem to be good at math and like the sciences, and if you become an architect, you have to be an architect. That's it. But if you become an engineer, you can either do that or you can, there's more opportunities. You can work in a bank, you can work in a firm. Like it does, because the concepts of engineering is just like problem solving and like, math skills. All these things are more broad, I guess.
Mm.
And so, yeah, when he brought that up, I just looked into it more, and yeah, for me, it felt like a perfect fit. Like it was a blend of the two. A blend
Mm.
of still having part in that world of like building stuff, but then also being able to use the other part of my brain, I
Right.
guess. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that was really wise advice from your mentor. But I'm
Yes.
curious, like, were you like, so obviously you weren't sold on being an architect. Like some people, it's like their dream to be architects, and it's like, hey, there are other things you can do. Is what I feel like he said to you. But
Hmm.
yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I wanted it, but I don't think it was like I have to become an architect.
Okay.
Obviously, because I didn't. Like it was not like, oh no, I have to give up my dreams.
Okay,
It
okay.
was like, no, okay, that sounds like a better idea.
Well, I mean, actually, I guess that's the point of this podcast too. But for me personally,
Hmm.
I think build a building that must be an architect. I don't think about the structural engineer behind the architect.
Right.
And so it's cool that you were able that person was able to suggest that to you, and you were able to find a career that is relatable to what it is that
Hmm.
you wanted to do. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, oh, yeah, like you just Googled it, or how did you come upon structural? Do you know?
I think he suggested
Oh, he
civil
suggested
engineering.
it.
I think he suggested civil engineering.
Okay, what is the difference?
Well, structural engineering is a subset of like a field within civil engineering.
I see.
So civil engineering is the broad, major, I guess you'd say. So
Mhm.
so I went to Georgia Tech, and I graduated with a civil engineering degree. So when you go into school, or at least for Georgia Tech, I don't know if it's different somewhere else, but it's a civil engineering degree, and then there's different specialties that you can go into. So you
Mm.
can just go straight civil, or you can do structural engineering, or you can do geotech engineering, which is what your cousin does.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's like different branches. But yeah, so civil engineering usually deals with the outside of the building. So everything except the building itself. So the landscape around the parking lots, how the cars are going to come in and out of that lot, like all these things, everything that's outside surrounding it is designed by the civil engineer.
Like a speed bump or something?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but then are civil engineers and landscape architects similar?
They work together,
Okay.
but the landscape architect is responsible for the landscape, which is, just like the trees, the shrubbery, like
I see, I see.
all those things. And then the civil engineer is responsible for the concrete stuff or the dirt
Like
stuff.
like a curb, yeah, like a curb or something.
Yes, they decide where and how the curbs are designed, like where they go, the site walls. Sometimes there's like walls that hold dirt up.
Sure.
Like because if I mean, you notice when you go somewhere else,
Uh-huh.
you'll see. Like they're like usually, not usually, but sometimes there are like big walls that are holding like dirt because the site had to like
Oh,
be
okay,
dug up
yes,
for the
yes.
building to be there. Like those
That's not
walls,
what you call it. I thought you called it something else.
the walls,
Yeah. Like
retaining
a
walls.
retaining wall. That's
Yes,
okay. But anyways, okay. Uh-huh.
like things like that. Like they design everything like that.
I see. I mean, like, what came to mind as you were talking, though, even about the walls and stuff,
Hmm.
was I remember the conversation with my cousin,
Hmm.
the geotechnical engineer, and he was saying, like, if you don't notice something, it's probably because the engineer did what they were supposed to do,
Hmm.
you know? So that
Yes.
kind of came to mind. It's like, what walls? Like, I don't know.
Right. So for
But,
civil, like the biggest thing I think would be if it's not ponding when it's raining,
mhm.
that means they did a great job. Because
Oh,
a big part of their job is to make sure the water flows to the right places.
right.
You know,
Like in parking lots,
yes,
especially.
especially, yeah, because if
Hey,
it's
do
just
you?
flat, it'll
Yeah.
overflow.
So, I mean, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but as you're telling me about that, like, so
Hmm.
in Irvine, when I went to
Hmm.
school in California,
Hmm.
like, when it would rain, which
Hmm.
was not often,
Hmm.
but when it did rain, like, the parking lots would flood like crazy.
Oh.
But
Hmm.
is that because, like, it doesn't rain there much, so they don't really have to account for that.
I don't know, maybe, or maybe they just messed up.
Really? I mean, it was like where I lived, like the
Uh-huh.
apartment complex where I lived.
Right.
But I just remember it like I couldn't even get to my car because it was so flooded.
Wow, that's crazy.
But and then I thought like, oh, maybe it's because it doesn't rain here much.
Hmm. I mean, I guess anyone could have messed up. It could have been the engineer, or it could have been the people making it,
Oh,
or
right, the
or it could just
construction
be
people.
clogged and no one cared because it doesn't
Ah,
rain. Like I
I
don't
see,
know.
I see.
Could be anything.
Man, so now everyone's gonna notice, like if
Yeah.
there's puddling,
Yep. It's
someone
like
messed up.
someone messed up here.
Okay, well, going back to your schooling, hun, like, um, while you were in school,
Hmm.
and so you were already declared. It wasn't like you were undecided going into school.
No, yeah, I declared and I.
Okay, and then, oh well, first of all, like culturally, when you moved from Brazil to the
Hmm.
States, like, and going to college here, like, was it a big shift for you, or what was that like?
Yeah, it was a big shift, but what I think I mean, I'm sure everyone knows this, but I think the biggest shift in culture was just how relationships work, like
Mm.
between, like people in Brazil are usually warmer and people here are usually more individualistic, I guess.
Mm.
So I guess that was very different. Um, but yeah, I don't know if like culture shift was the biggest thing, but like, because at the same time, like I was having a culture, I guess, shock, you could say, but at the same time, I was dealing with being by myself without my family. So I don't know what's what. You know what I mean? Like everything was happening
Mm.
at once. So it's hard to pinpoint like, oh, this was definitely something that was memorable.
Mm. Mm.
But I think, yeah, like people usually, um, the biggest, oh, like like in line with that, right? In line with people being more individualistic. I think it was really weird when I would offer to buy them food.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I think you thought it was weird too.
I thought it was weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you buying everyone food?
Yeah, but like, I grew up in a culture where it's like that, like the older people like that we hang out with, like they would offer to buy food for us, or like even when we hang out with friends, like we'd buy food for each other and stuff like that. But here is like, oh, why?
But you weren't even an older person. You were a
No, no, I
younger
know, but like,
person.
even like between friends,
Yeah, I guess.
but I think that was, I don't know if that's like specific to, I think it's just more specific to my community there,
Mm,
you know, but
yeah.
that was weird for me.
But really good for us because you kept buying us food. um, well, I've never asked you this, but like, yeah, why did you come to the States? Like, why not stay in Brazil and be a structural engineer there?
I mean, my plan was already to come here, to the States. Like
Mm.
even my high school being an international high school, and I don't know if I talked about this in the previous episode with you. I don't think so. I think I talked about this in a different podcast with David Shin.
Oh, right.
But when I was younger, in sixth grade, my parents sent me to live a year in LA, and the reason that happened was because Brazil was very dangerous, and so
Mm.
I think something happened, their store was robbed, and then they kind of freaked out, and they said, okay, like we need to do something to like move our family, but we can't just move, or I guess they didn't want to just move. So the first step was to send me, and then like make me learn English, I guess, and then once I came back, I went to an international school where you, I guess, learn in English,
Hmm.
and so like everything was kind of like planned for us to come eventually, for
I
me
see.
to at least to come, and then yeah, that's why I came here. Yeah, that's why I came.
I know that that first year being here in America by yourself for the first time, or not, I guess not for the first time, but for the second time, um, excluding your sixth grade experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also culturally, like everything being different, because, and I would even say like even LA is different than Atlanta too.
Right.
So um like I know that it was difficult and challenging, but do you regret it?
No, I
Why
think it was
not?
great.
Oh, it was great.
I mean, it wasn't like great in terms of like, ooh, I want to do it again, but it
Uh-huh.
was like, I think it did mature me. I grew up a lot during that time, I
Mm.
think. Uh, just, learning to do things on your own and growing up. I think it was good for
Yes,
that.
I do remember you having to learn to do things and figuring it out.
Hmm.
But what was cool is that you actually did it and figured it out.
Right.
And I think, that kind of experience kind of forces you to do things that you would never do, right? Like,
Right.
I think I shared with you before, like, I remember when I went to college for the first time, and something as simple as I went to a friend's house. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, I went to school out of state without my family. And um, I went to a friend's house and they're cooking dinner and they asked me to cut an onion. And I
Hmm.
thought, yeah, like I can help you cut an onion. And I realized I had never cut an
Hmm.
onion before and I
Hmm.
didn't even know how to go about cutting this onion. But all that to say, like, you grow up in ways that you don't even realize you need to grow up in.
Right.
Because I think if I still lived with my parents, I could have gone without ever having to cut an onion.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But anyways, okay, so um so your first year was challenging in different ways, but as you started your classes and got into your civil classes and your structural classes, did you start to enjoy it, or were you like, oh man, like this is harder than I thought?
No, I think I enjoyed my, my major. I
Mm,
enjoyed the classes, and I think it solidified like my decision to do it. I think,
mm,
yeah, it wasn't like, oh man, I hate this, I can't do this. Because I mean, even if it was, I don't know if I would have changed my major, honestly. Just thinking about my personality, I feel like I would have just gone through with it.
sure, yeah.
I think, I don't know, but yeah, it was fun.
Well, that's good that it solidified your decision.
Hmm.
That's rare. Not it's no, it's not rare, but it's special.
It's good, yes.
It's a good thing. Okay, so um, fast forward, you graduate college,
Hmm.
um, and what's the next step for you? How do you find a job and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I graduated, and then I needed to get a job immediately because since I'm from Brazil, once your schooling is over, your visa expires,
Right.
and so I had to find a job ASAP. I had a month or something to find a job, and like if you get a job, you get a work visa for a year or something like that from school. And so honestly, for me, I think finding the job process was not that hard.
Mm.
Um, if it seems like there's a lot of postings on like for engineering jobs, but this particular one came from a friend, like one of my classmates actually. So
Oh,
he found out about this job posting, and he let me know about it. And then I applied and I interviewed and I got the job.
and what was that job?
It was a company that designed cell towers.
And
So
that's a structural job?
yeah, it was a structural job. So I sat there designing cell towers. So those towers that you see on the road, maybe on the highways, and they're everywhere. They're holding our cell phone like antennas. So
Hmm.
those towers are made out of these like steel things. If you look at it, so
Okay,
you design those things like how thick the piece is or how big, how long.
I see. So I can tell by your tone that you weren't that excited about this particular job, but it gave you a job.
Yes, he gave me a job. I mean, it was good and bad. Like I liked how fast paced it was because I feel like I enjoy that more, like having to finish things in a deadline, and the more you do it, the better. So that was fun, but the not fun part was that it was the same thing over and over again, like literally. Because I mean, all these towers are the same, like they'll be a little bit different, and depending on where it is, maybe the wind or the snow is a little different, but everything else is the same. So it was like the same thing over and over again. So depending on your personality, I guess, if you like to do the same thing over and over again, and if you enjoy that kind of, fast paced environment where you have like the more you do, the better it is, then I think it's a good job.
Did you learn a lot from that job, do you feel like, as far as like structural engineering goes?
No.
No.
Yeah, I think it was because mostly it was like, I mean, they have a software that is made for that.
I
So
see.
you just input like numbers, like how tall it is, how, all these dimensions, and then it kind of calculates for you. So no, I don't think I learned too much.
You know how there's like a lot of drawing involved in
hmm
structural engineering?
hmm
Like, do you have to be good at drawing?
No, I mean, it's because it's not like physical drawing, it's just like lines on the computer.
I see.
So, I mean, you can't be, I mean, anyone can do it, I think, right? Just
I don't
lines.
know.
I would think anyone would be able to draw lines on the computer.
Right.
And it's not like, it doesn't take skill. Does that make sense? Like
Right,
it's
right.
not a skill, it's
What
just
about,
like, go ahead.
I mean, I can't remember if I asked this to the architect that I interviewed,
hmm
but like, do architects need to be good at drawing? Do you know?
Probably not anymore.
Because everything's on the computer.
Yeah.
Oh.
So back then they would do all these drawings by hand. So maybe you kind of did need to be, you know, at least competent at drawing lines. But it's just with a ruler, so it's not that hard either.
That's true. Okay.
But
I'm just curious.
yeah, you don't have to know anything about drawing.
Well, that's good. So if you're not an artist, you can
Yeah,
be a structural
doesn't
engineer.
matter. Yes.
Okay. So, again, I know the story, so it's hard for me to like ask the questions. But the next question for me is, after you did the cell towers,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you went to Robertson Lawyer Roof.
Yes.
And I know that you did not start as a structural engineer at Robertson Lawyer Roof.
Mm-hmm.
So but you were a civil engineer.
Yes.
And I guess you kind of talked about the difference between civil and structural engineering,
Mm-hmm.
but about how what you mentioned was civil is responsible for the outside of the building and your structural is responsible for putting the building up.
Mm-hmm.
So which one did you have a preference? And it's like, is it like, how did you end up doing a civil job as a structural engineer?
I mean, again, this job also came from a friend who got a job as a civil engineer here, and I heard about the job, and I was, oh, that sounds so much more fun than making towers, making actual buildings. And so I interviewed, and I applied for the civil position because that was the only open position. So I got the job, and civil was a little easier because I think it's a very like learn on the job kind of thing.
I see.
There's not too much like pre-knowledge that you need. Yes, but I do prefer structural. So I mean, eventually I was moved to structural because they didn't need like people at civil. At that time, actually, a lot of people were getting laid off from civil.
Oh my gosh, you guys. No, this we're gonna pause and tell this story because I was like, I don't even know how many months pregnant with our first son, Eli. I was pretty far along. Or did we already have the baby?
I don't know.
I can't even remember. I feel
Yeah, I
like
don't
I was
remember.
pregnant. I feel like I was pregnant
I think you're
with
pregnant.
Eli.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was pretty far along and David calls me. He's like, "Hey, so I have some bad news." And I'm like, "Okay." And he says, "I got laid off from my position." Right? And I'm like, "Okay." Like, and my head is like reeling, right? It's like, "Okay, we're about to have a baby. My husband just lost his job. I am not working. Um and we don't have health insurance if he loses his job." Okay. And then he goes, "But they hired me back as a structural engineer." And I was like, "What the heck? Like, why couldn't you lead with that? Why did you have to scare me and tell me you got laid off? Because you just thought it would be funny."
Yeah.
Yeah. And was it funny?
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's still funny.
But yeah, so you got moved to structural at that
Hmm.
point. But like, again, did they move you because like, I guess, I mean, they knew you had a degree in structural engineering,
Yes.
right? So I mean, that's pretty much why that was able to happen, no?
Yeah. I mean, everything happened perfectly. So they were laying people off from civil because I guess, they didn't need that many people. But someone had just left from structural, and yeah, and they knew that I had a structural degree, so they just moved me.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's so kind of them, to
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like to
Yeah.
be able to move their own people and kind of think of you and realize, "Oh, I have to lay you off here, but I can hire you back here."
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, do you have a preference?
Yes, I prefer structural.
Why?
Civil was like too open ended for me. Um, like like I said, you design like say like you're designing the parking lot and you have to design where the water goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's very open ended. Obviously, you can make the water go anywhere and make it work, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like they work with feet at a time, not inches, and like it's very like not exact,
Precise. It's not precise.
precise. Yes, and I like precision, and I like right answers. I like to have the right answer,
I
not
see.
like multiple. Like, I mean, obviously, structure also has multiple right answers, but you know, there is a something that needs to happen definitely. As opposed to civil, I feel like there's like a lot of room to
Mm,
be. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't like that kind of
right.
uncertainty, and I also didn't like that civil had to do a lot of like researching, like in terms of like, say you get a site, a lot, right, for a Kroger or something, or a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
You need to design the site, but then you also have to find out all the utilities. You have to find out if internet can come there, if like the phone lines can come in. Like you have to call these people, like these companies, and like make sure it can, like all that due diligence. I
Mm,
hated it. I'm like, man, I have to call these people and find out like, oh my gosh. So this happened one time. I I think I had to find out if internet was available in this site, right? And then I went online, and I like there's like an application thing like that you do,
mm-hmm.
and I just did it because they didn't give me a straight answer, so I just wanted to see if it was available,
Mm-hmm.
and I did it, but then I didn't hear anything back, and so I called, and I called the lady, and I was like, hey, so I submitted this application, but like I don't need internet there. It was just I just wanted to know you know if it's available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the girl goes, oh, like it's too late. You're gonna have to pay like for because you applied. And I was like, what? No way. And she's like, I'm just kidding.
Oh, she was just having a good day and
Yeah,
felt like,
yeah. And like it scared the crap out of me because I was like, oh my gosh, I just like ordered internet for this place and now we're gonna have to pay this fine. And like, but yeah, like things like I hated like having to not interact with people, but like honestly, the research part was like so boring.
right, right.
Yeah,
You rather just do the building and stuff.
yeah. I'd just rather just work on my computer.
Right. I mean, but you still have to do due diligence a little bit, right? For structural.
Like, what do you mean?
Don't you like call people?
No,
Huh?
no.
Oh, you don't?
I mean, only if the contractor calls me when they're having problems and then like they have questions.
Oh, I guess that's better for you then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know the answer to that.
That's true. That's true. Hmm. Hey, something else came to mind as we were talking about civil engineering and at your particular job. And it refers back to your mentor kind of like directing you towards engineering. Our friend that works with you, that's your coworker and
Mm-hmm.
got you the civil engineering job or helped you
Mm-hmm.
get it. I mean, she's a mechanical engineer, right? That's what she studied at Georgia Tech, no?
Yes.
So like I just feel like it's worth mentioning. It kind of speaks to the fact that you don't have to be a specific type of engineer, but it is kind of flexible if you know numbers and you're good at like I don't know, being precise, being like building things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just like learning. Well, I don't think it goes the same way for any
Okay.
engineering, but for her in particular, I guess like just her degree helped her learn how to solve problems. At the end of the day, that's what it is, and like find out solutions to whatever it is. And so civil, like I said, it can be very like learn on the job kind of thing. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
I think it was easily, she could still do that even though she was mechanical.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I feel like it just opens doors,
Hmm.
like being an engineer in general.
Yeah. But I think structural would be a little bit harder, honestly,
Okay,
because
so that was my
there's a
next
lot of,
question. So
okay.
like, it's not so civil is more learn on the job, but like I was gonna ask you, do you think structural is the same? Like, or do you think no, you need a degree in structural if you're gonna be a structural engineer?
I mean, with
Or it
anything,
helps.
I
It
don't think
helps.
you need a
Yeah.
degree for anything because you can just
Okay,
YouTube
fine.
anything or Google
Okay.
anything. It helps if you have a degree. There is a lot of pre-knowledge that you need to do the job, I guess.
Hmm.
Like you need to know how to calculate how strong a beam is, how much load it'll take. But then again, you can argue that you can just input the numbers and the computer would do it for you. So a lot of it, yes, you might be able to just learn on the job, but then I guess when you get into the details, there are things that computers can't do that you might
Right.
have to
Right.
do. And so, I mean, I guess you could just Google it or YouTube it. You could probably figure it out. But it helps in this particular job. It helps to have a degree.
Right.
And I mean, you need a degree if you want to be a professional engineer,
Oh,
I think.
but I mean that would make sense.
Actually, if you don't have a degree, I think you can still take it,
Hmm.
but you just need more years of experience.
Oh, more than 5 years.
Yes.
I
But
see.
don't quote me on that. I'm not sure.
Okay, I won't quote you on that,
Yeah.
but either way, I mean, it makes sense. Just having more experience in anything before you getting, the stamp of approval
Right.
and responsible for the lives of many.
Hmm.
It would make sense. Okay, so like, what do you like least about being a structural engineer?
What do I like least?
Uh huh.
For my particular job, what I don't like is kind of going back to what I liked about my first job is I don't like how slow paced it is. It's, I mean, if you're building a school project, it'll take like months, for from start to finish. And yeah, I feel like I usually thrive when there is a shorter deadline and I have to finish it. Because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like I feel like I'm able to finish it fairly quickly, but I can't do that because if I do, I'll just sit there, for the next couple weeks. And so I think having to take my time to do my job is what I don't like the most.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that's particular to my company. Does that make sense? Because I feel like every company has different structures, like
I
to
see.
like how they do things. For example, I know my coworker used to work at a structural company that's just structural,
Mm-hmm.
and how they would work is they would have one team lead and then like two or three guys under, so they would like all work together in many projects. So you know what I mean, like so they would always be busy pretty much. So but mine is like we each get a project or two or three or four depending on, and so we end up working on it ourselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you run out of things to do, it's hard. It's There's only so many times you can ask for more things, because if you have 10 jobs and they all end up like, at one point it feels like you're just doing things like, and it's fine, but then there will come a time when they will all be due at the same day.
Right.
Like tomorrow I have like three projects that are due all of a sudden, like.
But even though it took like several weeks, even months to get things going, then
Yeah,
all of a
so like
sudden,
the the problem is that even though it took like 3 4 months for all these three projects to be due, it's like a week before where all the problems come. Like
right,
all the
right,
other
right,
engineers and the architects are like changing things, or they're like, oh, can we move this and can we do this? And then if you have 3 or 4 projects that's happening to, then you're like, okay, I don't have time to do all this. So I mean,
right.
that's the only thing.
That's kind of annoying, I guess,
Yeah.
because you've had all this time to work on other things, is why
Yes.
it's annoying.
Yes.
I see. Well, okay, then what do you like best about what you do?
Mm, I mean, I guess I mean, what I like best about it is the drawing part. Like I said, I've always enjoyed like drawing 3D models in the computer.
Right.
So I really, really, really like that part of my job,
Mm,
like drawing on the computer. And I guess I like the math part. I like finding the right answer.
mm-hmm.
Like working on a calculation and then finding that there's a right answer, and I like that. It's kind of nerdy, I guess.
Very nerdy. And all is that it? I just feel like that's not what I thought you were going to say.
Oh, what did you think I was gonna
I
say?
thought you were going to say like,
Like
what
seeing
we
the
already
finished
talked
project?
about. Huh?
Like seeing the finished
Yeah.
product. Yeah, I like that, but it's not what I like the most.
Oh, I see.
It's
Interesting.
cool, but it's not like, oh my gosh, I made this. Oh my goodness. It's just like, oh cool, look, I made this.
I guess. Do you find like do you find your work purposeful?
Do I find my work purposeful?
Like for you? I guess I ask that because it's like, oh, like for me, that would be the purpose behind being a structural engineer, like making things that matter.
Hmm,
Like schools matter,
I see.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, schools matter.
But then also, to that too, like when I was like, oh, it would that would be the best part, like seeing the end result. But then I realized you don't really see the end result a lot of times.
I don't. Yeah. Especially for these schools that are in like Macon.
Right.
I'm not gonna see that.
But yeah, do you have an answer?
Um I don't know. I think for me, um, there are like seasons where I find that or I feel that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh man, look, I'm building this school for these kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even as I'm drawing this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna pray for these chairs. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, or these classrooms. But there are other seasons where it's just like it's just work, and it
Mm-hmm.
just pays the bills. And I guess purpose for me would be more in the future, or what I think I want to do with my job. I feel like it's more towards the future. Like, I don't know if you remember me telling you, there's like this, I don't know if it's a company or it's not a company. What's the word for
It's
it?
like organization.
It's an organization. Thank you. So it's an organization that finds volunteers
Uh-huh.
to go do like projects overseas.
Oh, is it
So
like Engineers Without Borders or something?
I don't know what that is, but it sounds like it. So it's not that, but it's like, you know, they'll post like on their website like, oh, we're building a hospital in Uganda. Like,
Mm.
apply if you are an architect. We need an architect, we need a civil engineer, we need a structural engineer. So like you apply and you volunteer to go, and then you work on that project, for example. So that
Wow,
sounds like fun to me
that's
and very
cool.
purposeful. But to do that, I would have to get my,
PE
you know, my PE,
or
and
your S,
probably need to be retired, you know, because you
right?
have to be there, you know.
To the faraway future.
Yeah. But that sounds fun.
No, but that's cool. I will
Yeah.
go with you. I don't know what I can do, but
But you'd have to go with me.
why?
What if it's like months?
Yeah, I guess I would have to go with you.
Yeah. See, and our
So
kids
like
would have
when
to
our
be
kids
grown.
are in
Yeah.
college
Or something.
or have their own kids.
Right. They'll be somewhere else, not here.
Right. Um I mean like like what about that? Like what about I mean, okay, honestly, it might be yeah, it's biased. My question is biased, but
Okay.
you know, I always ask working moms on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast
Mm-hmm.
like how they balance being a working mom and
Mm-hmm.
a mom at home, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like and you know, what is that like for them? What's the experience like for them? I do feel like I don't ask. I mean, I haven't had a lot of dads on.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't ask that.
Mm-hmm.
Like about what it's like to be a working dad. And like your presence is needed at home. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess I feel more inclined to ask you that because I know my expectation of you as a dad
Mm-hmm.
and also my expectation of you to like put food on the table.
Mm-hmm. A lot of
um
expectation.
yeah, but no, but I mean that's I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
There are a lot of wives that feel the same way, you know?
Yeah.
So like can you I don't know what I want to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
but like I guess, you know, how do you balance everything is the question.
Hmm. I'm not the best person to answer this.
Why?
Because my answer is I just do.
And actually I can testify to that. Like he does. He just does it. There's no really way he does it or best way you do it. You just do it. Like
How
cuz
do
I
you
feel
answer
like
that question? I
what?
guess. I
No,
guess how
cuz
do you
I
answer
feel
that
like,
question?
you know, someone might say I don't know who would say this, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone would say like, "Oh, you know, to find a good balance, you need a good like you need to actually like make time for yourself first." You know, or something like that, you know?
Sure. Yes, I can see that.
But you don't even really do that.
I don't. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. I don't think I need it.
Well, you know, I am super thankful for you. I'm thankful for you being a structural engineer and you actually like liking what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so nerdy that you like
Yeah, it's
love
pretty
to
nerdy.
draw.
Yeah,
And
I love it.
I was really not expecting you to be like, I really, really, really like drawing.
I
Like,
really like drawing. Oh, that I mean that's another thing too. When I growing up, I really liked drawing.
in general.
Yeah, in general. You
Yeah.
don't have to draw to be an engineer,
Right,
but
right.
I did enjoy that
I see.
a lot.
But yeah, I'm super thankful that you're nerdy like that because even like you guys, even when we're driving and he sees like, you know, buildings being built or like shopping centers being built, he asks himself or asks everyone in the car, me and our kids. They're like, "Oh, I wonder what they're building." I look at it, it just looks like a bunch of beams. But then he's like, "What do you think it is?" I don't know what it is, right? And then he'll ask our 4-year-old son, Eli, what do you think that's going to be? Right? And our son Eli is like, "Oh, yeah, I mean that's cool. What is that?" You know? And I love that you guys talk about that. Okay, and then like last story about being a nerd. And like one time we were like driving by this gas station and it was like what was it, honey? It like collapsed.
Yeah, I mean, but that's not like a nerdy thing. It's like the thing fell.
No, babe.
You know, anyone would have taken a picture of that.
No.
Yeah.
You said, hurry, hurry, take a picture so I can send it to my boss. And I'm like, you guys are going to like talk crap about this engineer that messed up on that. But anyways, yeah, I love that about you. And I love that you can come home and just do it, you know, just be it present and be a good dad. Not only that, you are an editor for my podcast. You do all the editing. And you've been doing it for 1 year. You
1 year.
did
Yeah,
it.
this is episode 53.
53.
The first
yes.
one after a year. How does it feel?
How does it feel? It feels good. I feel accomplished.
Yeah.
Like
it's
truly.
Huge. Yeah.
You know, I think there are times or days where I'm like, if I'm honest, right? If I'm 100% transparent right now, like I just kind of want to get episodes out. You know, I'm not really thinking about the work that's being put in or even like if I'm honest, um like promoting the episode too. I just kind of want to put it out there because I really wanted to be diligent in getting like an episode a week out. You know, and I think you challenged me in the beginning because in the beginning I was like, oh, every 2 weeks, like that's doable. But you're like, no, it's got to be every week. And I mean, I tried, and yeah, I didn't even know I could contact 52 people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
And I didn't know I would find such willing and such enthusiastic like guests for 52 weeks. Like everyone has been so great. I feel like everyone has really loved their job. And even that, I'm like, wow, what a gift, you know, to love your job and then be able to impart some of your knowledge on what it is that you do to other people. And I'm so thankful for all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, congratulations.
Thanks. Congratulations to you to editing 52 audios and videos.
Yeah.
Thank you. But anyways, all that to say, I'm thankful for you. Thank you for being episode 53.
Of course.
Before we end our time together, I'm curious, is there anything that you wanted to share? Do you have any advice for anybody that like is thinking, hey, maybe I'll be a structural engineer, or any life advice at all?
I think one thing that I regret from my college years is not learning. so I like it was really I was really good at like school. You know what I mean? Like taking tests and knowing how to take them, knowing how to pass them, and I feel like at the end of the day, I just did that. I just passed the tests, and I didn't end up learning as much as I should have,
Mm.
and I regret that because I feel like there's so much relearning that I have to do as I'm, working. And I mean, I always say like I wish I could have worked for like 2 years before I went to school, because then I would have, one, known what I had to learn, but then two, understand the importance of learning. Because I mean, when you're in school, you're just like you don't really know the importance of what you're learning, and a lot of times, it doesn't matter. Like it's not like history matters,
Mm.
or English. I mean,
Right,
English
right,
matters,
right.
but like, um, and I guess a lot of other jobs you can just kind of has nothing to do with college, and like you can just learn on the job. But for this job in particular, I feel like I wish I had learned more.
Mm.
Um, that's one, and I guess life advice, just like if you said you're gonna do something, do it. This is what I tell my son every day.
Yes,
If you said you're gonna do something, just do it.
that's great advice.
That's it.
Well, I think I learned a lot about your job today, honey. So thank you again. If you have any questions and or any response to this episode at all, feel free to DM me. I can definitely connect you with somebody that's in structural. Oh yeah, I think you did mention last time before we started the interview that it would be cool if
Mm-hmm.
if someone was interested and they
Mm-hmm.
contacted us, you offered for them to just like come sit with you.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in, just if you just have interest and you want to see what a day looks like, you can come. And if you live in Georgia, obviously, you can come and just sit next to me for a day, and you know, I guess that
Yeah.
gives you a better idea of what it looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity. He can't pay you to sit
Yes,
there, but
I'm not gonna pay him. You should pay me.
that's true. But yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity for anybody listening if you're interested in structural engineering or like any type of engineering at all. I can definitely connect you with different types of people. So feel free to reach out, DM me, or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Until next time, bye.